The woman stumbled through the moonlit desert, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she heard the hoofbeats closing in behind her, knowing that if Marshal Crenshaw caught her this time, the noose would be around her neck before sunrise. Helena Ruth gripped her torn skirt with bloodied fingers, forcing her legs to keep moving even though every muscle screamed for mercy. The California desert stretched endlessly before her, silver and hostile under the moon's cold gaze. She had been running for 3 days straight, ever since she had fled Bakersfield with nothing but the clothes on her back and the truth burning in her chest. A truth that no one would believe. A truth that had made her a wanted woman. The Marshal's voice cut through the night air behind her. "You cannot run forever, Miss Ruth. Justice will find you, justice." The word tasted bitter as dust on her tongue. There was no justice in being blamed for a murder she did not commit. No justice in watching her employer, the wealthy banker Theodore Jameson, shoot his own business partner in cold blood and then frame her for the crime. She had been in the wrong place at the wrong moment, had seen what she should never have seen, and Jameson's money had bought the Marshal's loyalty faster than she could blink. Helena's foot caught on a rock, and she went sprawling forward, the impact driving the air from her lungs. She tasted blood and dirt, felt the sharp sting of scraped palms. Behind her, the hoofbeats grew louder. She scrambled to her feet, her vision blurring with exhaustion and tears she refused to shed. Not yet. Not until she was safe, if such a place even existed. Then she saw it, rising from the desert floor like salvation itself. A fence. Weathered wood posts stretching across the landscape, marking the boundary of someone's property. Beyond it, perhaps a quarter-mile distant, she could make out the dark shapes of buildings. A ranch. A homestead. Somewhere with people who might help her, or at least somewhere to hide. She threw herself at the fence, scrambling over it with the last reserves of her strength. Her dress caught on a nail and tore with a sound like thunder in her ears, but she did not stop, could not stop. The main house grew larger as she ran, a sturdy 2-story structure with a wraparound porch. There were corrals nearby, and she could smell horses and hay, the honest sense of working ranch life. Helena made it to the gate in the fence surrounding the immediate house grounds before her body finally betrayed her. Her legs simply stopped working, folding beneath her like wet paper. She collapsed against the wooden gate, her cheek pressed against the rough planks, her breath coming in harsh sobs. The hoofbeats stopped somewhere close behind her. She heard the creak of leather as the Marshal dismounted. "End of the line, Miss Ruth," Marshal Crenshaw called out, his voice carrying that false sympathy that made her skin crawl. "Come along peacefully now. No need to make this harder than it needs to be." Helena tried to push herself up, but her arms had no strength left. She managed to turn her head, looking back through the gate slats at the approaching lawman. He was a tall man, well-fed and prosperous-looking, his badge gleaming in the moonlight. Behind him stood his horse, sides heaving from the chase. "I did not do it," she whispered, though she knew it was pointless. "I did not kill anyone." "That is for a jury to decide," Crenshaw said, reaching for the gate latch. "Though between you and me, things will go easier if you just confess. Mr. Jameson is willing to speak on your behalf if you show proper remorse." Lies. All lies. Jameson wanted her dead before she could tell anyone what she had witnessed. A confession would just make the hanging quicker. The gate started to swing open and Helena closed her eyes, waiting for the Marshal's hands to grab her. This was it. The end of everything. "That is far enough, Marshal." The new voice cut through the night like a blade, deep and steady and utterly without compromise. Helena's eyes flew open to see a man standing on the porch of the main house, a rifle held loosely in his hands. He was tall and broad-shouldered, silhouetted against the lamplight spilling from the open door behind him. She could not make out his features clearly, but there was something in the way he held himself that spoke of absolute confidence. Marshal Crenshaw's hand froze on the gate. "This is official law business, friend. The woman is a fugitive wanted for murder. I will be taking her back to Bakersfield to stand trial." "Maybe so," the man said, descending the porch steps with an easy, measured stride. "But law stops at my fence. This is my property, and she is on my side of it." "Now see here," Crenshaw blustered, his face reddening. "You cannot harbor a criminal. That makes you an accessory." The man walked closer, and Helena could see him better now. He was perhaps in his late 20s, with a strong jaw shadowed by several days' worth of beard, and eyes that caught the moonlight like chips of blue ice. His dark hair curled slightly at the collar of his work shirt, and his sleeves were rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle. A working man. A man who looked like he had never backed down from anything in his life. "What is your name, Marshal?" the man asked calmly. "Crenshaw." "Marshal Tom Crenshaw out of Bakersfield." "Well, Marshal Crenshaw, my name is Yates Rutherford, and this is my ranch. The double R, in case you were wondering. Now, I see a woman who looks half dead from exhaustion on my property, and I see a lawman chasing her in the middle of the night. What I do not see is any proof that she is who you say she is, or that your claim has any merit whatsoever." "I have a warrant," Crenshaw said, his hand moving toward his coat pocket. Yates Rutherford shifted the rifle ever so slightly, not quite pointing it at the marshal but making it clear he could do so in a heartbeat. "That may be. But it is the middle of the night, and I cannot read a warrant in the dark. Seems to me this could all wait until morning. Give the lady a chance to rest. Give me a chance to see this warrant of yours in proper daylight, and we can sort this all out civilized-like. She is a murderer, so you say. But innocent until proven guilty is how it is supposed to work, is it not?" Yates's voice remained calm, but Helena heard the steel beneath it. "Now, you are welcome to camp outside my fence line if you like, but the woman stays here tonight under my protection. Come morning, we will talk." Marshal Crenshaw's face went through several shades of red and purple. "This is not over, Rutherford. I will be back with more men if I have to. That woman is going to hang. Maybe, but not tonight." Yates took another step forward, and Helena saw Crenshaw instinctively step back. "I suggest you make camp and get some rest, Marshal. You look about as worn out as she does." For a long moment, the two men stared at each other across the gate. Then Crenshaw spat into the dirt, turned on his heel, and stalked back to his horse. He mounted up and rode back beyond the fence line, but Helena could see him settling in the distance, clearly intending to wait and watch. Yates watched until the marshal was settled, then lowered his rifle and turned his attention to Helena. His expression softened as he looked down at her crumpled form. "Can you stand?" he asked gently. She tried, but her legs would not cooperate. Humiliation burned through her exhaustion. "I am sorry, I cannot. I have been running for so long." Without hesitation, Yates leaned the rifle against the fence post and crouched down beside her. "No need to apologize. You look like you have been through hell." He slipped one arm beneath her shoulders and another under her knees, lifting her as easily as if she weighed nothing at all. "Let's get you inside." Helena wanted to protest, to maintain some shred of dignity, but the warmth of his arms and the solid strength of his chest against her cheek were too comforting to resist. She let her head rest against his shoulder as he carried her toward the house, breathing in the scent of him, leather and sage and honest sweat. "I did not do it," she whispered. "I did not kill anyone." "I figured as much," he said quietly. "Murderers do not usually look so scared. They look mean or desperate or cold. You just look terrified." Tears finally broke free, sliding down her cheeks. No one else believes me. Well, I am not everyone else. He climbed the porch steps and carried her inside, kicking the door closed behind them with his boot heel. The interior of the house was warm and surprisingly neat for a bachelor's dwelling. A fire burned low in the stone fireplace, and worn but comfortable furniture filled the main room. He carried her to a sofa and set her down carefully, then grabbed a blanket from a nearby chair and draped it over her. "When did you last eat?" he asked. Helena had to think about it. "Yesterday morning, maybe. I stole some bread from a farmhouse." Yates shook his head and moved toward what she assumed was the kitchen. "Stay there. I will get you something." She heard him moving around, the clank of pots and dishes. Helena pulled the blanket tighter around herself and looked around the room properly. There were books on a shelf near the fireplace, which surprised her. Most cowboys she had known could barely write their own names. A few photographs hung on the walls. A stern-looking couple that might have been his parents, a younger Yates with an older man beside a half-built barn. Everything was clean and well-maintained, speaking of a man who took pride in his home. He returned with a plate of cold roast beef, bread, and cheese, along with a cup of water. "It is not fancy, but it is food." Helena took the plate with shaking hands and forced herself to eat slowly, though her stomach demanded she devour everything immediately. The food was simple but good, and the water was the sweetest thing she had ever tasted. Yates settled into a chair across from her, watching with those penetrating blue eyes. "You want to tell me what really happened?" Between bites, Helena told him everything. About working as a secretary for Theodore Jameson at the Bakersfield Trust and Loan. About staying late one evening to finish ledger work. About hearing raised voices in Jameson's office and going to check, only to see through the half-open door as Jameson shot his business partner, William Hodges, in the chest at point-blank range. About being seen by Jameson as she gasped in horror. About running, knowing that Jameson would use his wealth and influence to pin the murder on her rather than face justice himself. "Marshal Crenshaw is in Jameson's pocket," she said bitterly, setting down her empty plate. "Jameson owns half the businesses in Bakersfield, including the land Crenshaw's brother farms. One word from Jameson and that family would be ruined. So when Jameson told the Marshal that I killed Hodges in some sort of lover's quarrel, Crenshaw did not even question it." Yates was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. "Theodore Jameson," he said finally. "I have heard that name. He tried to buy land around here a few years back, tried to push out some of the smaller ranchers, got ugly for a while. That sounds like him. He believes his money puts him above the law. Maybe in Bakersfield, but not here." Yates leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Here is what is going to happen. Come morning, Crenshaw is going to push harder to take you. He might even go back to Bakersfield and return with more men. We need to figure out what the truth is before that happens." "How?" Helena asked hopelessly. "It is my word against a wealthy man's. No one will believe me." Someone might. Did Hodges have family, friends, anyone who might question Jameson's story? Helena thought about it. He had a wife. Martha Hodges. She lives on the edge of town with their 2 children, but I do not know if she would help me. She might believe the same lies everyone else does. It is worth trying, but first you need rest." Yates stood and moved toward the stairs. "There is a guest room upstairs. It is not much, but the bed is clean and the door has a lock if it makes you feel safer." The kindness in his voice made her throat tight. "Why are you helping me? You do not know me. For all you know, I really am a murderer." He turned back to look at her, and for the first time she saw him smile. It transformed his serious face, making him look younger and impossibly handsome. "Call it instinct. I have been around enough liars to know what they sound like. You are not one of them." Helena stood on unsteady legs, clutching the blanket around herself. "Thank you, Mr. Rutherford. I do not know how I will ever repay you. Yates, just Yates, and you can repay me by getting some sleep and not collapsing again. Come on, I will show you the room." She followed him upstairs, her legs protesting every step. The guest room was small but comfortable, with a brass bed covered in quilts and a washstand in the corner. A window looked out over the darkened ranch lands, and in the distance, she could see the tiny glow of Marshal Crenshaw's campfire. "There is water in the pitcher if you want to wash up," Yates said from the doorway. "My mother's old clothes are in that trunk there. They might fit you well enough for now. Your dress is pretty well torn to pieces." Helena looked down at herself and realized he was right. Her skirt was shredded, her bodice was stained with dirt and blood, and she had lost one sleeve entirely somewhere during the run. "I will be downstairs if you need anything," Yates continued. "Sleep as long as you need to. I will deal with Crenshaw in the morning. Yates." She stopped him before he could leave. "Why did you say that? About the law stopping at your fence?" His expression grew serious again. "Because I have seen what passes for law in these parts. Good men and bad men both wear badges, and sometimes the difference is hard to tell. But I know right from wrong, and I know my property is mine to govern as I see fit. A man has to stand for something, or he will fall for anything. My father taught me that before he died." He left, closing the door softly behind him. Helena heard his boots on the stairs, then the creak of the front door as he went back outside. Probably to keep watch, she realized. To make sure Crenshaw did not try anything in the night, she moved to the window and looked out at that distant campfire. The Marshal would not give up. Men like Jameson did not let witnesses live, and men like Crenshaw did not let quarries escape. She was trapped, really. Trapped on this ranch with nowhere else to run, dependent on the kindness of a stranger who had every reason to hand her over and none to protect her. Except he was protecting her. Against the law, against common sense, against his own best interests. Why, Helena turned away from the window and opened the trunk, finding neatly folded dresses that smelled faintly of lavender. She chose a simple blue calico that looked about her size and used the water in the pitcher to wash away 3 days' worth of dirt and fear. The water in the basin turned brown, and she had to refill the pitcher twice from a bucket she found in the hallway before she felt remotely clean. When she finally climbed into the bed, the sheets were cool and soft against her skin. Her body sank into the mattress as if she were melting, every muscle finally releasing its tension. She meant to stay awake, to think through plans and possibilities, but exhaustion dragged her down into sleep before she could form a single coherent thought. She dreamed of running through endless darkness, of hands reaching for her, of a noose swinging from a tree. But then the dream changed, and she was no longer running. She was standing in a sunlit field, and Yates Rutherford was there, his hand outstretched toward her, his blue eyes warm with something she could not name. Helena woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of voices raised in argument below. She sat up quickly, her heart pounding, and rushed to the window. In the yard below, Yates stood facing Marshal Crenshaw across the fence line. Even from here, she could see the tension in both men's shoulders. She dressed quickly in the borrowed calico dress, which fit reasonably well though it was a bit loose in the waist, and hurried downstairs. The front door was open and she moved to it cautiously, listening. "I do not care what your warrant says," Yates was saying, his voice hard. "I told you last night this is my property. You want to take someone from my land, you go get yourself a proper writ and come back with a judge's order." "A writ? Are you serious?" Crenshaw's face was red with anger. "This is obstruction of justice, Rutherford. I can arrest you for this. You can try." Yates crossed his arms over his chest. "But I've got 6 ranch hands who work for me, and they are all pretty loyal. You really want to start that fight?" As if summoned by his words, Helena saw several men emerging from the barn and bunkhouse, all of them moving to stand behind Yates. They were rough-looking men, the kind who spent their days working cattle and their nights playing cards, but they stood together with the confidence of a united crew. Crenshaw saw them too, and some of the bluster went out of him. "This is not over. I will be back, and when I come, you will regret this. I will take my chances." Yates did not move, did not back down an inch. "Now, unless you have got something new to say, I have got work to do." The marshal glared at him for a long moment, then mounted his horse and rode off toward the south, in the direction of Bakersfield. Helena watched until he disappeared from view, then stepped out onto the porch. Yates turned at the sound of her footsteps, and his expression softened. "Morning. How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in days." She descended the steps, very aware of the ranch hands watching her with curiosity. "Thank you for that, and for standing up to the marshal again." "He will be back," Yates said, walking toward her, "probably with reinforcements. We have got maybe a day, 2 at most, before he returns. We need to use that time wisely." "We," Helena repeated. "You do not have to keep helping me. You have already done more than anyone could expect." One of the ranch hands, an older man with a grizzled beard and knowing eyes, chuckled. "Miss, when the boss says he is going to do something, he does it. Stubborn as a mule, that one, begging your pardon, boss." Yates shot the man a look that held no real anger. "That is enough out of you, Pete. Do not you all have work to do?" The hands dispersed, though Helena caught more than one curious glance thrown her way. She and Yates were left alone in the yard, the morning sun already starting to heat the air. "I have been thinking," Yates said, gesturing for her to walk with him toward the barn. "You said Hodges had a wife. If we could talk to her, maybe she knows something that could prove Jameson is lying." "It is too dangerous," Helena protested. "Bakersfield is where Crenshaw and Jameson have all their power. Going back there would be walking into a trap." "Maybe, but what is the alternative? You cannot hide here forever, and I cannot hold off the law indefinitely." He stopped walking and turned to face her fully. "I believe you, Helena. I believe you did not kill anyone, but believing you and proving it are 2 different things. We need evidence." She wanted to argue, to tell him it was hopeless, but the determination in his eyes stopped her. This man had stood up to a marshal for her, a complete stranger. The least she could do was have the courage to try to clear her name. "All right," she said quietly, "but I am not letting you go alone. This is my problem, my mess. I will not hide behind you." "Fair enough." He smiled that transforming smile again, and Helena felt something flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with fear. "We will leave after lunch. Give the horses a chance to rest and us a chance to plan. Come on, let me show you the ranch while we talk strategy." He led her through the property, and Helena found herself genuinely impressed. The Double R was not the biggest ranch she had seen, but it was well run and clearly prosperous. There were perhaps 100 cattle in the visible pastures, good breeding stock from what she could tell, and the horses in the corrals were fine animals, well cared for and healthy. "My father started this place 20 years ago," Yates explained as they walked. "Just him and my mother and a dream. They built it up from nothing, fought droughts and cattle thieves and crooked land agents. When he died 5 years back, I thought about selling it. I was young, stupid, wanted to see the world, but my mother asked me to give it a year, just 1 year. And by the end of that year, I understood why they had fought so hard for this place. It is not just land, it is freedom. It is having something that is yours that no one can take away unless you let them." "Your mother," Helena said, "is she?" "She passed 2 years ago, pneumonia." His voice was steady, but she heard the grief beneath it. But before she died, she made me promise to find a good woman and fill this house with family again. Said it was too big for just one person. They reached a small corral where a beautiful chestnut mare was grazing. The horse lifted her head and immediately trotted over to Yates, nickering softly. "This is Sage," he said, running his hand along the mare's neck. "Prettiest horse I have ever owned and smart as a whip. I am thinking she is the one you should ride into town. She is fast if we need to run, but she has got a gentle gait. Easy on someone who has been through what you have." Helena reached out tentatively to stroke the mare's nose. Sage snuffed at her hand, then seemed to accept her, allowing the touch. "She is beautiful, but Yates, are you sure about this?" "About all of it. You barely know me. For all you know, I could be leading you into danger. Life is dangerous," he said simply. "My father used to say that the only real safety is in doing what is right and standing by it. Everything else is just an illusion." Your father sounded like a wise man. He was, stubborn, hard-headed, and impossible to argue with, but wise. Yates grinned. "I think you would have liked him, and I think my mother would have liked you." The way he said it, so casual yet so weighted with meaning, made Helena's breath catch. She looked at him, really looked at him in the bright morning sunlight. There were smile lines around his eyes, calluses on his hands, a scar along his jaw that she had not noticed before. He was handsome, yes, but more than that, he was solid. Real. The kind of man who did what he said and meant what he did. "I feel like I am dreaming," she said quietly. "Yesterday I was sure I was going to die. And now I am standing here with you, planning impossible things, and for the first time in days, I feel like maybe there is hope." Yates reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to, and tucked a loose strand of her dark hair behind her ear. His fingers were warm against her skin. "It is not impossible. Hard, maybe. Dangerous, definitely. But not impossible." They stood there for a moment, close enough that Helena could feel the warmth radiating from him, could see the exact shade of blue his eyes were in the sunlight. Something crackled between them, something electric and new and terrifying in the best possible way. Then Pete's voice called out from the barn, breaking the moment. "Boss, got a problem with one of the water troughs." Yates stepped back, clearing his throat. "Duty calls. Why do not you get some breakfast? There is food in the kitchen. I will be back in a bit and we will head out." He strode off toward the barn, and Helena watched him go, her fingers touching the spot where his hand had been. What was happening to her? She had known this man for less than 12 hours, and yet she felt safer with him than she had felt in years. Felt seen by him in a way that went beyond the surface. She shook herself and headed back to the house. This was not the time for romantic foolishness. She had a murder charge hanging over her head and a powerful man trying to ensure she never got to tell the truth. Whatever she was feeling for Yates Rutherford, it would have to wait until she was no longer a fugitive. Inside the kitchen, she found the makings of a simple breakfast and set about preparing it. Cooking gave her hands something to do while her mind raced. Going back to Bakersfield was insane. Jameson would have people watching for her. Crenshaw would be looking for any excuse to arrest both her and Yates. And yet, what choice did they have? Martha Hodges was the key. If the woman knew anything about her husband's business dealings with Jameson, any hint of the tensions that must have been building before the murder, it could help. At the very least, it might convince Martha to speak up, to question the official story. Helena was pulling eggs out of the skillet when Yates returned, his shirt damp with water from fixing whatever had been wrong with the trough. "Smells good," he said, moving to wash his hands at the pump. "You did not have to cook. You have done nothing but help me since I arrived. The least I can do is make breakfast." She plated the eggs along with some toast and the last of the roast beef, then poured coffee for both of them. They ate at the kitchen table, and the domesticity of it struck Helena hard. How many times had she dreamed of mornings like this? Of sharing a meal with a good man in a home that felt warm and safe. She had spent 5 years working in Bakersfield, living in a cramped boarding house room, saving every penny she could with some vague idea of someday buying a little place of her own. And in one terrible moment, Jameson had destroyed all of that. "You are thinking too hard," Yates said gently. "I can see it on your face." Helena managed a weak smile. "Just wondering how I went from having a boring, predictable life to being a wanted criminal eating breakfast with a cowboy who defies marshals. I prefer rancher to cowboy, if we are being particular about it." His eyes twinkled with humor. "And for what it is worth, I do not think your life is boring anymore. I would gladly take boring over this, would you?" He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Really? Because the woman I pulled off my gate last night looked like someone who had been running for a lot longer than 3 days, like maybe she had been running from boring for a while." His insight startled her. Helena set down her coffee cup carefully. "I wanted more," she admitted. "I wanted adventure, wanted to matter, wanted to be part of something bigger than ledgers and filing cabinets. But not like this. Never like this. Sometimes we do not get to choose how our adventures start. We only get to choose how we face them." Yates stood and carried his plate to the sink. "Come on. We should get going if we are going to make it to Bakersfield and back before dark." They saddled horses in the barn, Yates choosing a powerful bay gelding for himself while Helena mounted Sage. The mare responded beautifully to her guidance, and Helena felt a surge of confidence. She had learned to ride as a girl, before her parents died and she had been sent to live with her aunt in the city. It felt good to be in a saddle again, felt like reclaiming a part of herself she had forgotten. They rode south at a steady pace, the morning heat building as the sun climbed higher. The California landscape spread around them in shades of gold and brown, dotted with scrub brush and the occasional twisted tree. In the distance, mountains rose against the brilliant blue sky. "Tell me about your life before all this," Yates said as they rode. Who was Helena Ruth before she became a fugitive? Helena found herself talking, the words flowing easier than she expected. She told him about growing up in a small farming community in Missouri, about her father who had been a school teacher and her mother who had painted beautiful watercolors. About the fever that had taken them both when Helena was 15, leaving her orphaned and alone. About her aunt in Sacramento who had taken her in but made it clear she was a burden. About learning secretarial skills at a business school and finding work where she could, always moving, always searching for a place that felt like home. "And Bakersfield?" Yates asked. "Did it feel like home?" "No," she said honestly. "It felt like a stopping point. Somewhere to save money, somewhere to wait for the next thing. I never planned to stay." "Seems like you got your wish, just not the way you wanted." Helena laughed despite herself. That is one way to look at it. They talked as they rode, and Helena found herself asking questions in return. Yates told her about growing up on the ranch, about learning to rope cattle before he could write his name, about the year he spent in San Francisco working on the docks before coming home, about the woman he had almost married who decided ranch life was too hard and left him for a shopkeeper's son. "Did you love her?" Helena asked, then immediately regretted the question. "I am sorry, that is too personal. It is all right." Yates was quiet for a moment. "I thought I did, but looking back, I think I loved the idea of her more than the reality. She was pretty and knew how to talk to people, and I thought that was what I needed. But she never understood the ranch, never understood why I would choose this life. And I never understood why she could not see what I saw in it. We were speaking different languages, I guess. That must have hurt." "It did. But it also taught me something important. I need someone who understands this life, who wants it as much as I do, someone who sees the freedom in it, not just the hardship." He glanced at her, and there was something in that look that made Helena's pulse quicken. Someone who is willing to fight for what they believe in. They reached the outskirts of Bakersfield around noon, the town rising from the dusty plain like a mirage. It was bigger than Helena remembered it seeming, more intimidating now that she was returning as a wanted woman. They stopped on a low rise overlooking the main street, studying the scene below. "We need to be smart about this," Yates said. "Crenshaw probably sent word ahead. People will be watching for you." "The Hodges house is on the east edge of town," Helena said, pointing. "If we circle around through those back streets, we might be able to reach it without being seen." They guided their horses down into town, keeping to the alleys and less traveled roads. Helena's heart pounded with every person they passed, expecting at any moment to hear someone shout her name, to see Crenshaw or his deputies appear. But luck was with them, and they made it to Martha Hodges's small clapboard house without incident. The yard was neat but showed signs of neglect, weeds growing between the stepping stones. Helena dismounted and tied Sage to the fence post, her hands shaking slightly. This was it. This was where they would either find the evidence they needed or discover that hope was truly lost. Yates stayed close behind her as she climbed the porch steps and knocked. For a long moment there was no response. Then the door opened a crack and a woman's tired face peered out. "Yes, Mrs. Hodges." "Martha," Helena kept her voice low. "I am Helena Ruth. I worked with your husband at the bank." "Please, I need to talk to you. It is about William's death." Martha's eyes widened. You are the one they say killed him." "I did not. Please, you have to believe me. I saw what really happened and I need your help to prove it." The door started to close and Helena put her hand out desperately. "Please, just 5 minutes, that is all I ask." Martha hesitated, her eyes flicking to Yates. "Who is he?" "Someone helping me, someone who believes in the truth." Helena met the woman's gaze steadily. "Your husband was a good man, Mrs. Hodges. He deserves justice. Real justice, not whatever lies Theodore Jameson is spreading." At Jameson's name, something changed in Martha's expression. The fear was still there, but now it was mixed with anger. She opened the door wider and stepped back. 5 minutes. But if anyone sees you here, I will have to call for help. I have children to protect." They stepped inside quickly, and Martha closed the door and drew the curtains. The interior of the house was dim and cluttered, with children's toys scattered across the floor and dishes piled in the sink. The air smelled of old cooking grease and despair. "I am sorry for your loss," Helena said gently. "I know this must be an awful time. Awful does not begin to cover it." Martha sank into a chair, suddenly looking much older than she probably was. "William was the kindest man I ever knew. He would never have deserved what happened to him. And they say you shot him over some romantic entanglement. That is nonsense." William barely looked at other women. "Because I did not shoot him," Helena said urgently. "Theodore Jameson did. I saw it happen. I was working late and I heard them arguing. I looked in and saw Jameson pull a gun and shoot your husband. Then he saw me and I knew I had to run because he would never let me testify against him." Martha's hands twisted in her lap. "Jameson. I knew there was something wrong about him. William had been worried for weeks before he died. He would come home agitated, saying things were not right at the bank, that the numbers did not add up." Yates leaned forward. "Did he say anything specific? Anything about what Jameson might have been doing?" He thought Jameson was embezzling, moving money around in ways that looked legal on paper but were actually theft. William wanted to go to the authorities, but he needed proof. He was gathering records, I think. Documents that would show what Jameson was doing. Helena's breath caught. Do you still have them? Those documents? I do not know. After William died, men came from the bank. They took all his papers, said they needed them for the investigation, but William was careful. He might have hidden copies somewhere. Martha stood and moved to a small writing desk in the corner. He had a lockbox. I have not been able to open it. The key was on his person when he died, and the marshal never returned it. Yates moved to the desk and examined the lockbox. It was a simple metal container with a basic lock. "May I?" Martha nodded, and Yates pulled a small knife from his belt. He worked at the lock for perhaps 30 seconds before there was a soft click and the box opened. Inside were papers, neatly stacked and labeled. Helena shuffled through them quickly, her secretarial training letting her parse the financial information rapidly. And there it was. Proof. Clear, undeniable proof that Theodore Jameson had been systematically stealing from the bank for at least 2 years, moving money between accounts, creating false loans, and pocketing the difference. Tens of thousands of dollars, all carefully hidden in a web of transactions that looked legitimate unless you knew what you were looking for. "This is it," she breathed. "This is enough to expose him, to prove that he had a reason to kill your husband. But will anyone believe it?" Martha asked hopelessly. "Jameson owns this town. The mayor, the judge, half the businessmen. Even if you show them this, they will find a way to bury it." "Maybe in Bakersfield," Yates said, "but California is bigger than one town. We take this to the territorial marshal in San Francisco. Get it in front of people Jameson does not own. It is a long shot, but it is better than nothing." Martha reached out and gripped Helena's hand suddenly. "If you do this, if you expose him, you have to promise me something. Make sure everyone knows that William died trying to do the right thing. Make sure my children grow up knowing their father was a hero." "I promise," Helena said, tears stinging her eyes. "I swear it." They left the house quickly, the documents hidden inside Yates's saddlebag. Helena felt lighter than she had in days, but that lightness evaporated when they rounded the corner back onto the main street and found themselves face to face with 3 men wearing deputy badges. "Well, well," one of them drawled, a mean-looking man with tobacco-stained teeth. "Boys, I do believe we just found ourselves a murderer and her accomplice." Yates's hand moved toward his holstered gun, but the deputies already had their weapons drawn. "Do not even think about it, Cowboy. You are both under arrest." They were marched down the street toward the jail, and Helena felt her brief hope crumbling. They had been so close, so damned close. And now Jameson would win after all. The jail was a squat brick building that smelled of sweat and despair. Marshal Crenshaw was waiting inside, looking smug and self-satisfied. "Miss Ruth, Mr. Rutherford, I warned you this would not end well." He gestured to the cells. "Lock them up. Separate cells. I will send word to Mr. Jameson that we have recovered his documents." "So you know about the embezzlement," Helena said bitterly as a deputy shoved her toward a cell. "You know he is a thief and a murderer, and you are still protecting him. I know that Mr. Jameson is a pillar of this community, and that you are a disturbed woman who has led a good man astray." Crenshaw's smile was cold. "The hanging is scheduled for tomorrow morning. Any last words should be said tonight." The cell door clanged shut, and Helena sank onto the narrow cot, feeling the weight of defeat crushing her. Across the narrow hallway she could see Yates in his own cell, his face tight with anger. "I am sorry," she called to him. "I never should have let you help me. Now you are going to hang because of me." "I made my own choices," he said firmly, "and I would make them again." "This is not over, Helena. I swear to you, this is not over." But as the afternoon dragged into evening and no rescue materialized, Helena found it harder and harder to believe him. They had gambled everything and lost. Tomorrow morning, She would hang for a crime she did not commit, and Yates would likely hang beside her for the crime of believing in her. Night fell, bringing cooler air but no comfort. Helena lay on the cot, staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the things she had never done, all the places she had never seen, all the chances she had never taken. She thought about Yates, about the way he had stood up for her without hesitation, about the brief moments of connection they had shared, the promise of something more that would now never be fulfilled. In another life, another world, maybe they could have had something real. Maybe that ranch could have been her home. Maybe she could have helped him fill that big, empty house with the family his mother had wanted for him. "Helena," Yates's voice came softly through the darkness. "Are you awake?" "Yes. I need you to know something." She heard him shift on his cot. "These past 2 days, getting to know you, helping you, it has been the most alive I have felt in years, and I do not regret a single moment of it. Even if tomorrow comes and we do not get out of this, I do not regret it." Her throat tightened with unshed tears. "I do not either. You made me feel safe. You made me feel seen. Nobody has ever done that before." "If we do get out of this," he said slowly, "and that is a big if, I want you to know that you would always have a place at the Double R. Not as a guest or someone I am helping, but as someone who belongs there, if you wanted that, if you wanted to stay." Helena closed her eyes, letting the tears fall now. "I would want that, more than anything." They fell silent after that, and eventually exhaustion pulled Helena into an uneasy sleep filled with dark dreams. She woke to the sound of shouting and gunfire. Helena sat up abruptly, her heart racing. In the cell across from her, Yates was already on his feet, pressed against the bars trying to see what was happening. The sounds of chaos came from somewhere outside the jail. Men yelling, horses neighing, more gunshots. Then the jail door burst open and Pete, Yates's grizzled ranch hand, appeared with a shotgun in his hands. Behind him were the other Double R hands, all armed and looking grimly determined. "Boss," Pete called out, "where are the keys?" "Desk drawer," Yates said, his voice tight with barely contained hope. One of the hands rummaged through the desk while Pete kept his shotgun trained on the hallway leading to the marshal's office. They found the keys and had both cells open in seconds. "What is happening?" Helena asked as Yates pulled her out of the cell. "What is happening is my boys decided they were not going to let me hang," Yates said, gripping her hand tightly. "Pete, where is Crenshaw?" Locked in his own office. "We jumped his deputies when they were making their rounds. Got most of them tied up in the back room." Pete grinned fiercely. "But we need to move fast. Someone will have heard the ruckus and sent for help." They ran out of the jail into the pre-dawn darkness. Horses were waiting, including Sage and Yates's bay. Helena mounted quickly, her hands shaking with adrenaline. "The documents," Yates said urgently. "Did you get my saddlebags?" "Got everything, boss. Your gear is on your horse." "Then let's ride." They thundered out of Bakersfield as the town began to wake around them, shouts and alarm bells following them into the desert. Helena leaned low over Sage's neck, urging the mare to greater speed, hardly daring to believe they were free. They rode hard for an hour before Yates finally signaled a halt near a rocky outcropping that offered some shelter. Everyone dismounted, breathing hard, and Pete pulled out canteens of water. "I cannot believe you did that," Yates said, looking at his crew with something like awe. "You broke into a jail and assaulted law officers. You could hang for that." "We could," Pete agreed calmly. "But we figured you were worth it. You have always been square with us, boss. Always treated us fair. And besides, Miss Helena here did not look like no murderer to me. Looked like someone who needed help." The other hands nodded agreement, and Helena felt overwhelmed by their loyalty, their courage. "Thank you," she managed. "All of you. I do not know how to repay this." Just make sure the boss does not do anything stupid like trying to go back to Bakersfield again," one of the younger hands said with a grin. "That is payment enough. We need a new plan," Yates said, checking his saddlebag to make sure the documents were still there. "Crenshaw will be after us harder than ever now, and we cannot go back to the ranch. That is the first place they will look." "San Francisco," Helena said. "It is still our best bet. Get these documents to the territorial marshal, tell him everything. It is our only chance to clear our names and bring Jameson to justice." "San Francisco is a week's ride from here," Pete said doubtfully. "And Crenshaw will be sending telegrams ahead, letting every lawman between here and there know to watch for you. Then we will have to be careful." Yates looked around at his men. "I cannot ask you all to come with us. You have done more than enough. Head back to the ranch, lay low. If anyone asks, you were there all night and have no idea what I am doing." "With respect, boss, that is horseshit," Pete said bluntly. "We are in this now, all of us. And I do not know about the rest of these boys, but I always wanted to see San Francisco." The others voiced their agreement, and Helena saw the emotion flash across Yates's face before he nodded sharply. "All right then. We ride together. But we stay off the main roads, avoid towns where we can. We are fugitives now, all of us. There is no going back from this." They mounted up again and headed west, toward the coast and the distant city that represented their only hope. As they rode, the sun rose behind them, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Helena rode beside Yates, their horses matching pace, and despite the danger they faced, she felt a strange sense of rightness. This was where she was supposed to be. Riding toward an uncertain future with this stubborn, principled man who had risked everything for her. The week that followed was the hardest of Helena's life. They traveled mostly at night, sleeping in shifts during the day in whatever shelter they could find. They avoided settlements, living on what they could hunt or the supplies the ranch hands had brought. They crossed dusty plains and rocky hillsides, always watching their back trail for signs of pursuit. But it was also, in some ways, the most wonderful week of Helena's life. Because in those long night rides and quiet camp moments, she and Yates grew closer. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing stories and dreams and fears. She learned about his childhood, about the time he broke his arm falling out of a tree and his mother nursed him through the fever that followed. About his first cattle drive when he was just 14 and thought he was a grown man. About the drought year when they almost lost everything and his father's determination kept them going. And she told him things she had never told anyone. About feeling invisible in her aunt's house, like she was a ghost haunting rooms she did not belong in. About the strange men who had propositioned her at the bank, treating her like an object because she was a woman alone with no family to protect her. About the loneliness of her boarding house room and the nights she cried into her pillow, wondering if this was all life would ever be. "You are not invisible," Yates said one night as they rode under a canopy of stars so brilliant it hurt to look at them. "You are about the least invisible person I have ever met. I feel invisible most of the time, like I am watching life happen to other people while I just exist on the edges." "Not anymore." He reached across the space between their horses and took her hand, his grip warm and solid. "You are right here, right now, fighting for your life and your truth. That is not invisible. That is brave." Helena held his hand tight, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his fingers. "I am terrified. Me too. But I would rather be terrified with you than safe without you." They crossed into the San Francisco territory on the 6th day, the landscape changing from desert to rolling hills dotted with oak trees. The smell of the ocean reached them before they could see it, salt and brine carried on the wind. Helena had never seen the Pacific before, and when they crested a hill and she got her first glimpse of that endless blue expanse, she gasped aloud. "It is beautiful," she breathed. "It is," Yates agreed, but he was looking at her instead of the ocean. They reached the outskirts of San Francisco on the seventh day, the city sprawling before them in a jumble of buildings and streets that seemed impossibly crowded after a week in the wilderness. The ranch hands looked uncomfortable, these men who were used to open spaces and clear skies, but they stuck together as they navigated into the city proper. Finding the territorial marshal's office took some asking around, but eventually they stood before a solid-looking building on a busy street. Helena's hands were shaking as Yates helped her dismount. "This is it," she said. "Either this works or we are done." "It will work," Yates said with a confidence she wished she could share. "Come on." They left Pete and the other hands with the horses and entered the building. The interior was bustling with activity, men in uniforms and suits moving purposefully through hallways. A clerk looked up as they approached. "Help you? We need to see the territorial marshal," Yates said. "It is urgent. We have evidence of murder and embezzlement in Bakersfield." The clerk's eyebrows rose. "That's so, and you are." "My name is Yates Rutherford. This is Helena Ruth. And before you say anything else, yes, she is wanted in Bakersfield, and yes, I am the one who helped her escape. But we have proof that she is innocent and that the real criminal is still free." The clerk studied them for a long moment, then stood. "Wait here." He disappeared through a door, and Helena felt her nerves stretching tighter with every passing second. What if they did not believe them? What if Jameson's influence reached even here? What if they had come all this way for nothing? The door opened again, and a tall man with iron-gray hair and a marshal's badge emerged. His weathered face was stern, but his eyes were sharp and intelligent. "I am Marshal James Whitmore," he said. "Come into my office and tell me your story." All of it. They spent the next 2 hours doing exactly that. Helena explained everything from the beginning, and Yates corroborated her testimony. They laid out the documents William Hodges had compiled, showing the clear pattern of embezzlement. They described Jameson's reaction to being caught, the murder, the frame-up, the corrupt local marshal. Whitmore listened without interruption, studying the documents carefully. When they finished, he leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers beneath his chin. "This is quite a tale," he said slowly. "And these documents are certainly damning, but you understand my position. I have a local marshal who swears you are a murderer, Miss Ruth. And you have just confessed to me that you, Mr. Rutherford, broke her out of jail." Helena's heart sank. "Then you do not believe us." "I did not say that." Whitmore leaned forward. "I said it is complicated, but I have been a lawman for 30 years, and I know the difference between a criminal and someone who has been wronged. You do not strike me as a killer, Miss Ruth. And these documents tell a story that makes sense of all the pieces." "So, what happens now?" Yates asked. "Now I send deputies to Bakersfield to arrest Theodore Jameson and Marshal Crenshaw. I take your statements as formal testimony. And you two wait here under my protection while we sort this mess out. It will take time, maybe weeks, but if what you have told me is true, justice will be done." Helena felt tears of relief spilling down her cheeks. Thank you so much." "Do not thank me yet. We have got a long road ahead before you are truly cleared. But I give you my word, Miss Ruth. If you are innocent, I will prove it." The next month was a blur of legal proceedings and testimonies. Jameson was arrested, protesting his innocence loudly to anyone who would listen. But when confronted with the documents, and Martha Hodges's testimony about her husband's suspicions, even his expensive lawyers could not save him. More evidence emerged once people were willing to talk. Other bank employees who had noticed irregularities but been too afraid to speak up. business owners who had received threats from Jameson, even a witness who had seen Jameson with William Hodges the night of the murder. Marshal Crenshaw was arrested as well, charged with corruption and conspiracy. He tried to claim he had been fooled by Jameson, but his bank records showed deposits that corresponded suspiciously with the amounts Jameson had embezzled. Through it all, Yates stayed by Helena's side. The ranch hands had returned to Quartz Hill after delivering them safely to San Francisco, but Yates remained, attending every hearing, every meeting with lawyers. He rented rooms at a modest hotel and made sure Helena had everything she needed. "You should go home," she told him one evening as they walked along the waterfront, watching the ships in the harbor. "Your ranch needs you. The hands cannot manage everything on their own forever. Pete is more than capable of running things for a while longer," Yates said. "And I am not leaving you to deal with this alone. I am not alone. I have lawyers now, and Marshal Whitmore is making sure I am protected. That is not what I meant." He stopped walking and turned to face her, the setting sun backlighting his profile. "Helena, these past weeks, getting to know you, fighting beside you, I have realized something. My mother was right. That house is too big for one person. But more than that, my life is too empty for one person. I need someone to share it with, someone brave and smart and stubborn enough to match me." Her breath caught. "Yates, I know this is not exactly romantic timing. I know we are standing here while you are still technically on trial and I am still technically a fugitive. But I also know that life is uncertain and tomorrow is not promised. So I am asking you now before anything else can go wrong. When this is over, when you are cleared and free, would you consider coming back to Quartz Hill with me? Not as a guest, as my wife." Helena stared at him, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "You want to marry me? I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life. I want to show you every corner of that ranch and watch you make it yours. I want to fill that house with family and laughter like my mother wanted. I want to stand beside you through whatever comes next, the good and the bad." He took her hands in his. "I know it is fast. I know we have not known each other long, but when you know, and I know." "Yes," she said, the word bursting out of her before she could overthink it. "Yes, I will marry you. I will come back to the ranch and make it our home. I will stand beside you and fight beside you and love you for as long as I live." He pulled her into his arms and kissed her there on the waterfront, with the gulls crying overhead and the salt wind whipping around them. It was not a gentle kiss, not a tentative first touch. It was a claiming, a promise, a seal on the vow they had just made to each other. Helena kissed him back with everything she had, pouring all her fear and hope and love into that moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Yates rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Helena Ruth. I think I have loved you since the moment you collapsed at my gate." "I love you too," she whispered. "You saved my life in every way a person can be saved." The trial of Theodore Jameson began 6 weeks after their arrival in San Francisco. It was a spectacle, with reporters from newspapers as far away as Sacramento attending to document the fall of a man who had once seemed untouchable. Helena testified for hours, describing in detail what she had witnessed. Martha Hodges testified about her husband's suspicions and the documents he had hidden. Bank employees testified about the irregularities they had noticed. Experts testified about the embezzlement scheme and how much Jameson had stolen. Through it all, Jameson maintained his innocence, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all charges: murder, embezzlement, conspiracy, and corruption. The judge sentenced him to hang. Helena felt no joy at the verdict, only a deep weariness and a sense that finally, justice had been served. William Hodges could rest in peace, and his children would grow up knowing their father had been a hero. Her own charges were formally dismissed, and Marshal Whitmore issued a public apology for the treatment she had received from Crenshaw. The territorial governor commended her bravery in coming forward, and even gave Yates and his ranch hands pardons for the jailbreak, citing extraordinary circumstances. They were married 3 days later in a small church overlooking the bay, with Pete and the ranch hands serving as witnesses and Marshal Whitmore giving Helena away in lieu of the father she had lost so long ago. Helena wore a simple white dress purchased from a shop in the city, and Yates wore his best suit with a string tie and boots so polished they gleamed. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Helena felt something settle in her chest that she had not even realized was unsettled. This was it. This was home. Not a place but a person, this strong and stubborn man who had defied the law itself to protect her. They returned to Quartz Hill a week later, riding into the Double R at sunset on a warm September evening. The ranch hands had prepared a celebration, with a pig roasting over a fire and what seemed like half the neighboring ranches in attendance. Pete had even strung up lanterns between the barn and the house, their warm light pushing back the desert darkness. "Welcome home, Mrs. Rutherford," Yates said as he helped her down from Sage. "Mrs. Rutherford." Helena tested the name silently and found she liked the sound of it, liked the way it tied her to this place, to this man, to this life she was choosing. The party lasted late into the night, with music and dancing and more food than she had seen in months. Helena danced with Yates under those lanterns, his arms strong around her waist, and felt happiness bubbling up inside her like spring water. "Are you glad you collapsed at my gate?" he asked, his lips close to her ear. "Best decision I never made," she said, making him laugh later, much later when the guests had gone and the hands had retreated to the bunkhouse. Yates carried Helena over the threshold of the main house just as tradition demanded. He set her down gently in the parlor, and she looked around at the space that was now hers to shape and fill. "It is a good house," she said softly. "Your parents built something wonderful here. They did. And now we get to add to it." He drew her close, his hands cupping her face with infinite gentleness. "I meant what I said before. I want to fill this place with family, with children who will grow up knowing they are loved and safe and free." "How many children?" she asked, her eyes dancing with amusement. "As many as you are willing to give me," he kissed her nose. "Though I would settle for just you if that is all I get. You are more than enough." "I want children too," Helena said, suddenly serious. "I want to give them everything I never had, a home that is truly theirs, parents who are there. The chance to grow up without fear. Then that is what we will do." He kissed her properly then, deep and slow and full of promise. Together. That night, in the bedroom that had once belonged to his parents and was now theirs, Helena and Yates began their life together in full. There was tenderness and passion, nervousness and laughter, the sweet awkwardness of two people learning each other for the first time. And underneath it all was the solid foundation of the love and respect they had built through fire and hardship. The years that followed were good ones, better than Helena had ever dared to dream. The ranch prospered under their joint management, with Helena's head for numbers and organization complementing Yates's knowledge of cattle and horses. They expanded the herd, added more land, built a new barn and a bunkhouse that could house a dozen hands comfortably. Their first child, a son, was born in the spring of 1878, delivered by a midwife with Yates pacing frantically outside the bedroom door. They named him William, after the man whose courage had helped clear Helena's name. He had his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair, and from the moment Yates held him, Helena knew her husband's heart had been captured completely. A daughter followed 2 years later, red-faced and squalling and absolutely perfect. They named her Claire, simply because Helena had always loved the name. She was her brother's opposite in temperament, quiet where he was loud, thoughtful where he was reckless. 2 more children came in the following years. Another son named Peter after the loyal ranch hand who had helped save their lives, and finally, another daughter named Margaret after Yates's mother. The house that had once echoed with emptiness now rang with children's laughter and the constant motion of a busy family. Helena threw herself into motherhood with the same determination she had once brought to fleeing across the desert. She taught her children to read from the books in Yates's library, to ride almost as soon as they could walk, to understand that the ranch was not just their home but their responsibility. And she made sure they knew their history, knew about the uncle they had never met who had died for doing the right thing, knew about the struggle their parents had faced to be together. Martha Hodges became a regular visitor to the ranch, bringing her own children to play with Helena's. The 2 women had forged a bond through tragedy, and watching their children grow up together felt like a small victory over the darkness that had nearly consumed them both. Pete eventually married as well, to a widow from Quartz Hill who ran the general store. They built a small house on the edge of the Double R property, and Pete continued working as Yates's foreman until the day he died at the age of 73, still in the saddle and still complaining about the younger hands not knowing how to work. The ranch grew and changed over the decades. They added irrigation, bringing precious water to fields that had always depended on uncertain rain. They began breeding horses as well as cattle, developing a line of sturdy, intelligent mounts that became sought after throughout California. They built a schoolhouse when their children were old enough, hiring a teacher so that the ranch children would not have to travel to town for education. But through all the changes, through all the years, the core of the Double R remained the same. It was a place where hard work was respected, where a person's word was their bond, where the law of the land was tempered with compassion and common sense. Just as Yates had said that first night, law stopped at his fence, and beyond it, justice and mercy walked hand in hand. Helena and Yates grew old together, their dark hair turning silver, their faces weathering like the fence posts they had maintained for so many years. Their children grew up and made their own lives, though William stayed to run the ranch after Yates could no longer handle the harder work. Claire married a lawyer in San Francisco but visited often. Peter became a horse trainer of some renown, traveling throughout the West. Margaret married a neighboring rancher's son, her parents' influence evident in the way she ran her own household with firm kindness. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Helena and Yates sat together on the porch of the main house, watching the sun set over land they had worked and loved for 3 decades. Their hands were clasped, fingers intertwined as they had been so many times before. "You ever regret it?" Yates asked softly. "Coming here, marrying a stubborn rancher instead of finding some easier life?" Helena turned to look at him, at the face she knew better than her own, at the man who had risked everything for her when he had no reason to. "Not once, not for a single moment. You gave me everything I ever wanted and things I did not even know I needed. You did the same for me. This house was just wood and nails until you filled it with life. I was just going through motions until you gave me something to fight for." He raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "I would do it all again, Helena. Every bit of it. Even the part where I collapsed at your gate and brought a Marshal down on your head, especially that part. Best thing that ever happened to me was you stumbling onto my property looking half dead and wholly desperate." His eyes twinkled with the humor that had never left him. though I do wish you had arrived at a more reasonable hour." She laughed and leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat there as the light faded, two people who had found in each other the home they had always been searching for. The final years of their lives were quiet and content. They watched grandchildren arrive and grow, tiny copies of their own children who would carry the family forward into a new century. They saw California change around them, the wild frontier of their youth becoming increasingly settled and civilized. But the double R remained a constant, a piece of the Old West preserved by choice and love. Helena Ruth Rutherford died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 83, with Yates's hand in hers and her children surrounding the bed. Yates followed her 6 months later, his heart simply giving out one morning as he watched the sun rise over the land he had worked his entire life. The doctor said it was natural causes, but their children knew better. He had died because his other half was gone, and he had no desire to remain behind. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, under the shade of an ancient oak tree. Their gravestone was simple: Yates Rutherford, 1849–1931, Helena Ruth Rutherford, 1851–1934. The law stopped at their fence, love started at their gate, the double R continued on, passed down through generations of Rutherfords who learned the story of how their family began. How a desperate woman collapsed at a cowboy's gate, how he defied a marshal to protect her, how they fought together for justice and built a legacy of love that endured long after they were gone. And on quiet evenings, when the wind blew just right across the California desert, ranch hands swore they could hear laughter coming from the direction of the main house. The laughter of two people who had found each other against all odds and held on tight through everything life threw at them. The laughter of a love that not even death could diminish. Because some stories do not end when the people in them die. Some stories live on in the land and the legacy and the family that continues forward. And the story of Helena and Yates Rutherford was one of those stories, told and retold around dinner tables and campfires for generations. A reminder that sometimes the most desperate moments lead to the greatest happiness, and that true love is worth fighting for, no matter the cost. The double R still stands today, still worked by Rutherford descendants, still maintaining that same mix of hard work and compassion that its founders established so long ago. And if you visit there on the right evening, stand at the gate where it all began, you might feel something in the air. A sense of rightness, a whisper of the past, a promise that home is not always where you start but where you choose to stay. That is where their story lives now. In the land, in the family, in the fence line that still marks the boundary where one world ends and another begins. Where the law stops and love takes over. Where a fugitive woman and a stubborn cowboy found something worth more than safety or comfort or peace. They found each other, and in the end, that was everything.